Good morning, afternoon, and evening from beautiful Paris, France. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you to day 2 of the 5th annual Airport PRM Leadership Conference. Yesterday was absolutely amazing. Attendees joined from all over the world, representatives from the UK, the US, New Zealand, India, Canada, Somalia, Portugal, Mexico, the list goes on and on. And as we talked about yesterday, the attendees represented the entire spectrum of the stakeholders responsible for the service in our airports for assisted passengers. And by all accounts, you were all extremely attentive. Thank you. We have an extremely interesting and interactive day planned for today's panel. I see many attendees are still joining. Once again, welcome one, welcome all. As we did yesterday, let's start with a little bit of housekeeping. Questions can be asked in the chat, in the question box, and we will be answering them at the end of the introductory presentations by all of our speakers today. If we are unable for time reasons to have them answered, we will submit them to the presenters and answer them at the end of the conference. But I think today the idea will be to really bring everyone together, so we'll really go through those questions. During today's panel, we'll ask a number of you to raise your hand. See the raise hand button on your control panel, and we will unmute you to interact with the panel live. Lastly, the GoToWebinar platform does not support the live closed captioning. We will make sure the recordings have the closed captioning included. Before we get started, I would like to hand it over to Roberto so he can share with all of us the highlights from day 1. Roberto?
Good afternoon, William. Good afternoon, everyone from London, United Kingdom. What a day, what a fantastic day we had yesterday at the Ozion Airport PRM Leadership Conference. The amazing wealth of information shared by our outstanding presenters yesterday was unparalleled. In many years of conferences, I struggle to recall walking away from a session so well informed and inspired. The session was right on track with Martin Sibley's deep dive into the topic. Martin shared individual challenges and massive opportunities for the sector. We humans thrive on our comfort zones. When an airport or an airline treats us with dignity and respect, we stick to them, no matter if they're cheaper or more expensive than their competitors. And there lies the business opportunity. The following speaker, Tariq Kamal from New Delhi Airport, brought us all to the current challenges of the pandemic for sharing brilliant solutions his airport found to become COVID-free facility for all customers. From the many questions received, it is safe to say that New Delhi Airport's award-winning solutions have had a massive positive impact on the audience. Dr. Jennifer Kamoli, Expert 2020 Dubai, took the audience through the ideal journey of a person with a hidden disability, sharing useful tips on how to manage and deliver information, as well as making the airport's critical touch point easy to navigate. Linda Ristagno, IATA, shared recent and future positive developments the Airlines Trade Association has brought about in terms of policy and procedures. IATA commitment to deliver accessible air travel is testament to the association's determination to promote equality and inclusion in air travel. William Neese, Ozion, technical presentation highlighted how IT is the foundation upon which excellent customer care and assistance is built. In his presentation, he clearly explained how IT resolves operational challenges and how it helps create a positive cooperation between stakeholders, which in the end increases the quality of service output whilst driving efficiencies. Lauren Van Orn from Open Doors organizations helped the audience understand how to measure customer satisfaction among persons with disabilities and the ever-growing segment of over 65s. Knowing your customers is essential to better care for them. Brian Cobb, Cincinnati Northern Kentucky Airport, who is regarded as one of the brightest minds in the airport industry, took the audience into the future of customer care and assistance. It is no mystery that solutions today seen as futuristic were already being trialed at CVG years ago. Closing day 1, we had the first ever Ozion Airport Accessibility Award. Liverpool Airport, Bologna Airport, and Napoli Airport presented their solutions for persons with disabilities to the conference attendees, who then voted for the one they liked most. Bologna Guglielmo Marconi Airport won the 2020 award with over 44% of all votes cast. My congratulations to Nazareno Ventola, Bologna's CEO, and his team. and to Emilia De Santis, Napoli, and Christina Smith, Liverpool, and their teams for the great work they do to help persons with disabilities feel included. With so much happening on day one, I cannot wait to see and hear what day two will bring to us. It is with great pleasure that I introduce to you today's speakers. William Neese, Director of Operations, Austrian Airport Software. William is the Director of Airport Solutions for ASEAN and also the Conference Director of the annual Airport PRM Leadership Conference. He has overseen the effective use of technology to transform operations for assistant passengers in the full range of airport sizes, smaller, regional to extremely large airport hubs. We will then have Gina Emrich, Director of Passenger Experience for Open Doors Organization. Gina began her career in aviation in 1987 at American Airlines and has worked in a variety of roles focused on innovation and improving the customer experience. Over the past 7 years, Gina has been focused specifically on the customer experience, including journey mapping, data analytics, and products procedure implementation. We will then have Phil Burke, Assistant Director, Customer Experience for Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport. Phil joined the Metropolitan Airports Commission in 2001 in the Commercial Management and Airline Affairs Department. 3 years later, he was named the Assistant Director of MSP Operations Facilities. In 2013, Phil was promoted to the Director of Operations at MSP, and in late 2018 transitioned to a new role to lead the development of a new department, Customer Experience. Tim Joniek is Director of Government and Stakeholders Relations at Houston Airport Systems. Tim joined Houston Airports in 2008, where in addition to his duties related to government and stakeholders relationships, he has served as Managing Director of ADA Coordination, implementing and managing numerous new initiatives to increase accessibility at Houston airports. And on a lighter side of things, Tim is an athlete. Tim is very busy running marathons in his free time. Finally, we will have Rich Pereira, Systems Project Manager at Wilson James. Rich is a Systems Project Manager for Wilson James in the United Kingdom. He is the lead responsible for the data management of the PRM team at London Gatwick Airport. He manages and interprets data in order to advance the PRM operations on site, as well as ensuring the service level metrics, ECAC, is accomplished. Well, now it's over to you, William, with your presentation. We lost William for a second, and here is coming.
No, you haven't lost me. I am just getting everything set as all the professionals do. Voila.
Fantastic. Fantastic. But there you are.
Thank you
very
much,
William.
Roberto. That was a wonderful entrance. Thank you. I, for one, am extremely excited about today's panel. I think that there is an incredible amount of work for all of us to do and understanding for all of us to have when it comes to the idea of not just the service messages, not how they're sent, et cetera, but how we're all using data to inform our decision making, starting from actually receiving the data, going to the use of the data itself, and the end result being the passenger experience for all of our passengers requiring assistance. I'm going to go just through a couple of slides, and of course now I seem to be the glitch in the system, so I'm going to escape and do this again, or I'm not. There we go. Well, there we go. Thank you very much. To start off, I think it's a good idea that we take a look again at the foundations. The IATA Type B messages give us a framework and allow for the collaboration and assisted passenger service to begin. It's sort of the underpinnings of the service, if you will. And in order for that to all take place, what we're looking for is all of the different areas to work together. And that is that you're taking the messages that you get, whether they're CETA or AirInc, and you're putting that all together with the airline's information, the AODB, Airport Operating Database, and then you're tying that together with each airport's framework in order to create the best possible jobs. There are a few areas where and I think Gina will get deeper into this area, but there are a few areas where it sort of falters, and it goes back to the idea of the common use of the messages. You know, what are they? How are we all using them? But if you are using the messages, what are some, or in the first case, you're not. Areas where it falters are where the messages simply aren't used. They're available, they may be sent, but they're not used. And then there are areas where the messages may be coded to go to the wrong location. So you think you're sending a message to one airport, but it's going to another. Or, which is often the case, and it's an area that we spend quite a bit of time with inside of our organization, is the formatting of the messages, because it all comes down to, without getting super technical, down to the spaces, the use of the individual lettering, et cetera, et cetera. And then it's simply the type of messages that are used. From our experience, what we find is that the PAL and the CAL messages, which are really the provisional messages, are fantastic for setting out the provisional guidelines for your service. But the PSM message, the passenger service message that is actually sent from the departure control system, that's the message that lets you know that that passenger is in fact on that aircraft. And what we have found is that by transitioning closer to that PSM message, we can really see a massive sort of growth in productivity and efficiency, because let's say there's 10 passengers on a flight and 6 of them are a PSM, 4 of them are either a PAL and a CAL. With very good accuracy, those 6 will be on that flight, and the PALs and CALs may or may not. From our perspective, from a technology perspective, what we're looking at is how do we use these messages? And the fact of the matter is, depending on the airline, some airlines aren't using them at all. Other airlines are only using the PSM message, or they're only using the PAL, or they're not using all 3. But in European airports, we see a really good use of the messages. And overall, you'll see situations like you see on the screen now, where you have multiple messages for the same passenger. So you'll start out with the PAL, which is giving you the first order. The CAL is a change order. You may have another change order. You may go back to another PAL, and then you could have the PSM at the end. And it's very important, and this is why the continuity of the messages is so important, the technical continuity, so that we can take all of these messages, combine them together, and ensure that we know exactly what that passenger requires. Briefly on the SSR codes, I'll leave this up to Gina. The main thing is, are we speaking the same language? And after that, the IATA codes themselves, there's one code that I think we all can discuss at greater length, which is the MAAS code, which if you speak to IATA, they'll let you know that that was never meant to be a assisted service code. And yet we still see out in the ecosystem that that's a code that comes up as a service code. Now, that's not to say that if somebody requires wheelchair assistance or they're blind and the MAAS code comes, that you wouldn't bring it in. This is part of the understanding of how you interpret and bring in the data. So if you have a MAAS code on itself, by itself, normally, it's not a assistive code, but you could have, back to that stacking idea, you could have somebody who is blind that also requires wheelchair assistance and may have a meet and assist code just for something ancillary. And all of that would then need to be brought into a system and stacked accordingly. And by accordingly, I mean as far as the operation is concerned, because the wheelchair would primarily, and if the passenger was a carry, would then sort of override what service you would be expecting operationally throughout the airport. And what that does is it gives us this sort of picture that you see up on your screen. It gives us an ability to modelize the service. So it doesn't matter what airport we go into. With the codes, what we're able to do is we're able to say that as this passenger arrives in this airport, say you're leaving from New York. In New York, there's no ambulance. There's no remote need for an ambulance to take a passenger. So the codes would dominate and say, okay, this passenger needs to go from the departure area to the flight, onto the flight, fly to Heathrow, for example, where they have remote stands, and you require an ambulance because that passenger is a carry passenger. So the underpinnings become so very important to the service of the operation, and making sure that we are having the right service for the right passenger at the right time. And that really has, it sounds very basic, but it has a huge impact on our service operations when they understand what it is exactly that they're going to be doing with each passenger. Because whether you have 100 passengers a day again or 5,000, you're normally sizing in comparison. And I think that Ridge will later on get into how that affects the operation as well. So with that, I would like to thank you, Roberto, very much, and I will hand over the screen. Thank you all very much for listening.
Thank you very much. And now I'm pleased to invite Gina. Here you are. Gina, the floor is yours.
Hello. Hi, everyone. So glad to be with you this morning. I really want to thank William and his team for keeping this conference going, even though we can't all be together in Paris. I think keeping up the exchange of ideas is great, even when the demand for travel is low. So hopefully we can improve the experience for passengers with disabilities. So I'm very excited about that. I don't have a lot of slides, but I do have one that I want to show. Let's see. Can you guys see that? So I'm going to follow up a little bit on what William said about SSR codes really are the foundation for a good customer experience. So all the speakers yesterday talked about, and everyone on this conference has the same desire to provide a good experience for people who need special assistance of any kind. And that's what the goal of SSR codes really was whenever IATA got together and defined what SSR codes are. So airlines agreed that this is what we would do and defined those codes that William just talked about, BLND, MAAS, there's a whole list of them, right? And airlines use them today, but the problem is they're not used consistently. So if you have the PAL message and the CAL message and the PSM, it's not always easy to know if one comes from one airline, what meet and assist means, versus if it comes from another airline, what meet and assist means. So the goal is for there to be consistent use of the SSR codes. And, you know, William talked a little bit about somebody who's blind. Today, the biggest complaint you get from somebody who's traveling who's blind is that an airline shows up with a wheelchair to assist them, even though they didn't request a wheelchair. Every airline needs to know from a safety perspective that someone is traveling blind because of any kind of emergency situation. But what would be helpful to do is if somebody tells an airline that they're traveling and they're blind or low vision, to be able to have a secondary question, which is, do you need any special assistance at the airport? Then maybe you add meet and assist and say, that's not a wheelchair, right? Meet and assist, they need guidance through the airport, and that they are blind or low vision. That would be wonderful to be able to have the whole industry agree this is the way we allow information about a passenger who's blind or low vision. Meet and assist, as William said, is one of the most complicated codes. It exists. Meet and assist is the definition in the IATA manual, but it's not used by any airline consistently. I think if we asked everybody on the call, there would be as many different definitions as there are airlines. So there needs to be some consistency there. So different airlines and the disability community come up with ideas for new codes all the time, thinking that that will help. there may be a need for new codes, but until everyone's using the existing codes in the exact same way, it's going to be difficult to know what really is needed, right? So this is the only slide I really have. I just want to give you the image of it all revolves around the passenger. So the SSR codes really are the foundation of a good service. And until we get some consistency, it's going to be hard to make a difference in this space and ensure a good, consistent experience for someone traveling with any type of disability. So let's talk about airlines to start with. It begins with the passenger telling an airline what their needs are, because that's who they're booking with, right? So airlines have a responsibility to make that booking process accessible as possible in whatever websites they use, but also allowing in the booking process a request for service, allowing you to edit your booking later so that if you didn't think about it when you were in the middle of booking, or you realize how long or distance the airport is that you need a wheelchair assistance, then you should be able to add it later without calling someone. It needs to be as easy as possible. And airlines also have the responsibility of ensuring the training for all of their employees. So I see it happen all the time where a passenger says, you know what, they get to the airport, they realize they need a wheelchair, they ask for wheelchair assistance, and it's provided, but nobody goes back and updates their record. So the downline stations don't know that they might need that assistance. So there needs to be a consistent application of, it's critical that SSR codes get added to the PNR every single time that we know a passenger needs any type of assistance, so that everyone knows it and it ends up on the PAL list, the CAL list, and all the downline groups that might need that information. So airlines play a really critical role here. If all of the airlines come together and agree that this SSR code means this and this is the service that it requires, like there should never be a time when a WCHR also has a meet and assist. If you're going to meet somebody with a wheelchair, that already is meet and assist. So there doesn't need to be additional information. And that's the kind of stuff that needs to be cleaned up. And the reason for that is not every passenger books at the airline website, right? So they're booking on OTAs like Orbitz, Travelocity. I mean, there's an unlimited number of them out there. Right now, it's difficult to go to any of those and Orbitz, Travelocity and say, please change your booking process to allow a customer to ask for special assistance and use an SSR code, because every airline's doing it differently. If every airline was doing it the same, you could give passengers even more opportunity to give you the information before they get to the airport, because in the booking process, wherever they book, the information would be there. Today, it's very difficult to improve that process because the codes aren't being used consistently. So that's kind of the role of the airlines and the role of OTAs. The service providers would benefit greatly if there was consistency. If those PAL messages and CAL messages and whatever other methods that they receive information from airlines around the world were the same for every airline, it would simplify the training for the service providers, and they would have lower ad hoc rates, because it would always mean the same thing, and airlines would be giving opportunities for passengers to tell what they need before travel, which is all beneficial, right? So service providers would benefit greatly, and in overall, potentially costs would come down there because they could train less and they could have lower IT costs. And then the airports have a huge benefit here. And as we all know, there's two kind of big models out there. There may be others, but the two biggest are the sort of European model, where the airport has the contract with the service provider and every airline is paying through the airport for that provider. In North America, it's much more consistent that an airline has a relationship with a service provider at each airport. And so there's gaps in service in the North American model for sure. But one of the big gaps is that it's rare for an airport to know much about what special services are being provided at that airport by each different airline. So airlines don't necessarily have a way to smoothly give that information to airports today, and it varies greatly from airline to airline. So you can imagine what would happen to the operational efficiency at an airport if they did have all of this information. So think about security providers, right? Security partners today have very little visibility into how many passengers who need wheelchair assistance are coming through their airport on a given day. For sure, that's the case in North America. It may be better in the European model, but not that consistent. But if they knew that in advance, and they knew what the average was every day. We all know somebody who's getting a wheelchair assist takes longer to get through security. It would be much better for our security partners to plan for that. If they knew Tuesdays were and Saturdays were the peak days for wheelchair pushes in the airport, they could man for that. So it would be a huge help. So daily planning in the operation at airports would be benefited by having consistent use of SSR codes and sharing between, once the airlines have that information, giving it to airports. The other thing that I think is interesting is that business planning at an airport has got to be difficult. A lot of airports put a ton of effort and energy into accessible travel, which is wonderful. But they're doing it not necessarily with all the information they could use. So what I mean by that is if they knew how many people were coming through their airport that were blind or low vision, it might be easier to justify spending money on an IRA. Everybody knows that it's the right thing to do, but we also know there's a business to run. And so having a business case for the things you're asking for is always more helpful. So if you knew the types of passengers that were traveling through your airports every single day, it'd be easier to justify getting Mobi lifts. It'd be easier to justify working with the airlines to get wheelchair lifts on the ramps. You'd know how many pet relief areas and how critical they are. You would know those things the more information you have. So that sharing of information is critical. The other thing that I think would be helpful for airports is when it comes time to renovate or new construction, having a consistent information about the types of passengers traveling and any passengers with special needs would help build the case for, I need to make sure I have enough cart space because we need X number of carts because of the number of passengers that we're transporting every day who need special assistance. It would also ensure you had enough elevators and elevators in the right places to be able to move passengers consistently. So overall, SSR codes are the foundation of good service. They're everything that everyone's talked about yesterday and what William just spoke about. If every airline was using every SSR code the same, it would make a very big difference in terms of the ability to provide the good customer service that we're all looking to do for passengers with disabilities. So with
Thank you very
that,
much,
sure, I will turn it over to the next team.
Thank you very much, Gina. Phil, over to you.
Thanks, Roberto. And I'm going to share my screen here. Tell me if you can see the presentation, please.
The screen is on perfectly.
Excellent. I'll get my video camera turned on as well, and we'll move along. So thank you very much. I echo William's and Gina's comments regarding the opportunity to speak here today. This is an exciting conference and an important conference, certainly. And in my role as the customer experience lead, we're certainly looking on a day-to-day basis how we can enhance the customer experience, and certainly enhancing that experience for the traveler with disability is a key focal point and certainly a passion of mine as well. So today I'm just going to talk a little bit about a few of the things that are going on here at MSP. Certainly not an all-inclusive list, but just a snapshot into some of the things that we're working on.
Excuse me, Phil?
Yeah.
I see your desktop, but not your slides.
Okay.
Do you need to switch the screens? Do you have two screens?
I do. How about now?
I still see your, I still see the plane taking off.
Okay, third screen.
There we go.
Okay, sorry about that.
Oh, that's fine. This is live. This is live production. Great job.
Right. Right.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
So just wanted to talk briefly about three things here. One being how we've embedded accessibility into our airport structure. Secondly, just talking a little bit about a new endeavor utilizing technology to better understand the flow of passengers who are utilizing wheelchairs. And then I'll just wrap it up with hopefully a word of encouragement. So just jumping into how we've embedded accessibility into our airport structure. And here is an organizational chart of what we call our Customer Service Action Council. And it's been in place for over 20 years. And really customer service is at the foundation of our daily airport operation. And just knowing that that we've got that organizational structure, including our airport's chief operating officer as the chairman of that committee, hopefully sends a message to all of our airport stakeholders how important treating our customers well is at the top of our organization. So again, how it's been embedded. And then specifically, I just wanted to talk about, well, there's two committees that I'm responsible for within that Customer Service Action Council. And one is our Travelers Advisory Committee, and that's made up of frequent travelers and airport staff. But the one I wanted to talk more about today.
Phil,
Hello?
sorry to interrupt. Would it be possible for you to open up the slides?
I thought I had it in presentation mode.
No, it's not in presentation mode.
It's not, okay. Yeah, it's not allowing me to, Roberto.
Oh yeah, perhaps it's just in read-only mode. I don't know.
Here, let's try that. Try one more.
Maybe the other option would be just to open it up to the full screen.
Yeah.
Drag the bottom and open it up to the entire screen of your computer.
Does that work? I just did that.
That works much better.
Okay, sorry about that.
No worries.
So anyway, just wanted to focus a little more on our Travelers with Disability Advisory Committee, made up of airport staff, and then more importantly, disability advocates, mainly local to the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. And Andrew Palmberg, that listed there, is the chairman of the committee, and he is deaf and represents the Minnesota Commission on Deaf and Hard of Hearing. So again, just talking a little bit about accessibility at the table during our airport design processes. And some of you might know we've gone through a pretty extensive remodel of all of our restrooms, our 100 sets of restrooms. We're by no means done, but we've been working on it now for about the last 10 years. And during those design discussions, we had obviously our architects and engineers and maintenance at the table and others, but we also had the disabilities community focusing on mobility and deaf and hard of hearing and blind and low vision. And what the result has been is award-winning restrooms that our passengers and customers and employees all really appreciate. So we've kind of built that accessibility into the design, and I just wanted to fast forward now up to today. And one of the things that's going on is that we are either adding or replacing lactation, nursing mothers, or companion care restrooms. And recently we had a design presentation to our Travelers with Disability Advisory Committee regarding some of those spaces and the access to those spaces, specifically on the non-secure side of our airport. And anybody who runs an airport knows that, especially on the non-secure side, you can end up with individuals utilizing spaces that don't need to be, whether it's somebody coming into the airport that has no business there and just utilizing the space and keeping it from being utilized by somebody who does need it. That's an ongoing challenge for us. So we've been working through this whole access dilemma and presented that to our Travelers with Disability Advisory Committee. And they had lots of questions during the discussion. And what we decided to do was to set up an ad hoc committee to work on the issue in detail. And the picture that I've got up there now is during one of those sessions. And we had the manufacturer of the phone system there describing all of the operational aspects of the system. We had the designers there, and then you'll also see the gentleman with the kind of the maroon shirt there. That's Andrew Palmberg again, who is our chairman, and sitting there working through the issues on the phone as well, or or joining us virtually was another one of our members who is blind and utilizes a guide dog, and both of them providing expert input into their specific disability and then how that can be translated into a good design. So again, first of all, I guess a great process, I think, but secondly, these individuals are doing this on a volunteer basis for us. So we greatly appreciate the time and the talent that they bring to the table for us. So that's all a good story, right? But we definitely have work to do. I say this a lot. We're better than we were, but not as good as we're going to be. So I just wanted to talk about an issue where hopefully we can use technology to better understand the flow of passengers who are utilizing wheelchairs. And just wanted to start with this is a recent complaint that we received from a customer who booked a wheelchair for her mother through XYZ Airlines. I've removed the names to protect the innocent. So they're dropped off at the airport by a bus company. When they went inside, assuming there'd be wheelchairs available for use, there were none to be found. My mother, terminally ill with cancer, had to walk or shuffle for an extremely long time through the parking area, to the elevators, to the shuttle, short of breath, before we found a wheelchair just sitting. This was not the fault of the airline. There needs to be wheelchairs available at all major entrances for people with disabilities or someone there to ask for assistance. We found no one. We were extremely disappointed with the accessibility. So, you know, we've done what I'd like to think a ton of work in trying to improve the access for all of our travelers, including travelers with disabilities, but we fall short, and there's a gap. And it's a gap that I think all North American airports deal with on a day-to-day basis. So just wanted to talk briefly about a couple of things that we do have in place that kind of fill the gap, but not to any great extent. We have call for assistance buttons strategically placed around our airport campus, where somebody in need of any type of assistance would make that call, and it's answered 24 hours, 7 days a week. So that's one way to do it. But then, you know, if they make contact with that individual, then they've got to dispatch the wheelchair company, and then that wheelchair company has got to get to that space. So, you know, in a time-sensitive environment, it could be 30 plus minutes before a wheelchair assistant shows up to get that individual to where they need to be. So not a timely way to move about the terminal. The other thing is that we've basically just strategically placed some wheelchairs around our campus. But in that case, you would need two individuals. Obviously, you'd need somebody who needs the assistance and then somebody to push them, whether it's a caregiver or a family member or whatnot. And then lastly, we have what we call interactive digital directories spread around our campus as well that provide all kinds of airport information. And we're working to improve that to include requests for wheelchair, so that's just another way for somebody to request that wheelchair. So we do have some mechanisms in place to make it easier for somebody to get a wheelchair, but certainly not ideal. So one of the exciting things that we've got going on is that we have a new department at our airport that's basically focused on operational analysis, and I've enlisted that individual to start working with me on this issue. And he is trialing an airport operations tool that's focusing on passenger and baggage forecasting and forecasting for our security provider as well. But in my eyes, why not include the individual that's utilizing a wheelchair as another data set to so that we can better understand, kind of to Gina's point a little bit ago about if we can better understand how many of those wheelchair assists are coming through the security checkpoint, we can share that information with our security provider. Or if there are other areas of the terminal where the wheelchair person or the person who's utilizing a wheelchair, if we can better understand how they're moving about our terminal, we can provide a better experience for them if we know where they are and when they're there. So I'm really excited about getting going on this. It's brand new, but I hope that this is one way that we're going to be able to improve that service. And then finally, just a word of encouragement. I just like to say, embed that accessibility into your airport structure. Use all available technology, and then certainly, I would assume everybody on the call today would agree that all of our travelers deserve to be treated equitably because it's the right thing to do. And then, the punchline: we're doing it, and I hope that all airports agree that they can do it too. So, thanks, Roberto.
Thank you very much, Phil. And on that note, I have to say that when William and I visited your airport back in 2018, we saw a lot of the good work that you guys are doing and making your facility accessible for everyone. Maybe William wants to chime in and comment further on that.
Well, I was really struck when we were visiting the airport by, it's a very large space, and one of the innovative things that the airport was doing, in addition to allowing joggers to come in and do a cycle through their, walking cycle through their, I think 1.3 mile circle, is creating a sort of an ongoing shuttle system so that passengers who may not need specific assistance but do need assistance to get from simply one area of the airport to the other, really without even having to request the service, can just walk up to a point that comes by, no questions, takes them to the next point. They can get on or off, and it just continues. And I think that was one of the big things that struck me while we were there. That it's the simple innovation that can make a huge difference in a passenger's journey.
Fantastic. We have to move on now because I have to warn all panelists that we have a lot of questions coming through. So you will be very busy as soon as we're done with all the presentations. And now I'm going to hand it over to Tim. Tim, are you here?
I am. Thank you.
Okay. You are, I cannot see you yet, but I trust I'll see you in a few seconds. I still cannot see you. I see PowerPoint. There you are. And I'm waiting to see you on camera.
There we go.
Fantastic. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Great conference so far. I've really learned a lot, and I've enjoyed hearing from my European colleagues as well. You're going to think that I'm going to talk all morning because I like to do that, but rest assured that I've gone through my slide deck and I'm about 9 minutes, which includes 3 minutes of 2 different videos. So thank you for the privilege of allowing me to share some of our airport accessibility successes with you today. I'd like to start by sharing a quick perspective of Houston, Texas and Houston airports. On a side note, I'd like to thank William for shipping the fresh pastries and Bordeaux to the presenters in North America. We greatly appreciate that.
You are welcome.
Okay, next slide. Houston airports, we serve a large and diverse population. Houston's the nation's fourth most populous city. 7 million residents live in the metropolitan statistical area. If Houston MSA was an independent nation at 490 billion in GDP, would rank as the world's 26th largest economy. Houston has ties all over the globe, is among the most diverse city in the world, with nearly 1 in 4 born outside of the United States. The city is a global leader in international business and home to the largest medical complex in the world. And frankly, we need it right now. Houston Airports is comprised of 3 airports and 1 licensed spaceport. We served nearly 60 million passengers in 2019. I'd love to say we'd serve that many in 20, but we all know that's not true. We serve 191 destinations, contribute 191,000 jobs, 36.4 billion to the local economy. And for the audience, we are 50-50 origin destination, meaning 50% of our passengers call Houston their final destination, and 50% of them are connecting elsewhere. Over the last 36 months, Houston Airports has engaged in efforts to better serve our passengers, focusing on technology, services and programs, and training. We've introduced new technologies, services, programs, and training. We are making the airport journey a more positive and memorable experience than ever before for people with disabilities. At least one of these ideas I got when I went to Phil's Universal Access conference in 2018. That's the app. We jumped on that kind of right away the following year. And as Gina mentioned, we don't know what accessibility services people are going to need when they get to our airports. So we're kind of planning in the blind, if you will, no pun intended. IRA is a service that connects blind and low vision individuals known as explorers with highly trained, remotely located agents to provide real-time verbal and visual assistance. Through the app on your smartphone or through an optional pair of smart glasses, IRA delivers instant access to visual information at a touch of a button, enhancing everyday efficiency, engagement, and independence to explorers. The app is free to download, and the service is free to all travelers at Bush and Hobby Airport. We geofence our airport, and we pay the bill for those IRA subscribers when they're in our airport. We were the second and third airports to join. I think Phil was the first, and then today more than 50 airports have joined. Just a little fact for you there. The young lady on the left, her name is Christine Ha. She was the show we have in America. It's called Master Chef, hosted by Gordon Ramsay. She was the winner of season 3 back in 2013. She's a Houstonian and she's blind. In October of 19, we launched an app designed to provide a preview of the airport experience before arriving to the airport. Every day, our airports host people with invisible, intellectual, or developmental disabilities, such as autism spectrum disorder. The Access Houston Airport app is an innovative program that prepares anyone, especially families raising a child with an intellectual or developmental disability, for their visit to our airports. The app prepares families through an array of tools and introduces all phases of the airport. We developed the app to make the visit to Bush or Hobby an engaging and meaningful experience for families. The app is free, and we've had a lot of success. Again, going back, we don't know who's using our airports. We don't know what disabilities people have when they arrive to our airport, what services they're going to need. So it's kind of, kind of a shotgun effect. We got to kind of see what's cost, what's within our budget to do, and what side research we can do to think we know who our customers are. Here are a couple testimonials to share. The first one is from our governor, Governor Abbott, who, if you don't know, Governor Abbott uses a wheelchair. Within the first 48 hours, the promotion of the app was picked up by 75 unique media outlets reaching 56 million people. Over the first 3 months of the launch, we averaged 1,000 monthly downloads of the app. This might seem insignificant in the grand scheme of, 140,000 daily passengers coming through here, but the users and the caregivers may not have been comfortable or even able to travel prior to the app, so we think it's priceless. This app is a game changer for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their caregivers. It will not only allow greater access to Houston's airports, but to the world. Houston Airports partners with organizations that train service dogs to provide real-world experience to young dogs, 6 to 24 months of age, who have been previously identified as being future trained service dogs. The purpose of the program is to familiarize prospective service dogs with the intricacies associated with the full airport experience, from parking lots to boarding bridges and everything in between. The program is not only a benefit to the person using the animal, but also airport stakeholders such as airline employees, security screeners, concessionaires. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a person screened improperly with a dog, but I'm glad it happened during this training exercise and not in real life, which we know probably may be happening also. On one occasion, we learned that one of the dogs was afraid to use the artificial turf that we have in our service animal relief area. So it gave the handler a chance, a takeaway to go work on their dog being able to use fake turf. Let's watch a short 60-second video that aired on a CNN airport network. I want to preface this with, we might not be able to hear it on this presentation, but it does have closed captioning. Here we go.
The cute dogs travelers see strolling through Houston airports might be puppies training to learn and adapt to the airport experience.
Part of our service dog familiarization program is Houston Airport provides a facility to conduct the training of the future service dogs. Everything from arriving to the airport, going through security check, boarding an airplane, even going to food and beverage services. And we're proud that we're able to provide the environment for this puppy in training to get the future skills it's going to need.
The purpose of the professional training held at George Bush Intercontinental and William P. Hobby airports is for the dogs to get comfortable guiding a passenger with a disability through the airport.
We just did our first flight, and thanks to the partnership, we were able to come and practice before we got on the flight, went to the pet relief area, and were able to practice going through security, so it was less stressful for the dog and for myself.
Houston Airports became one of the first known airports in the United States to develop an active PRM coordinator role in the Emergency Operations Center to proactively address known people with disabilities during irregular operations. As we know, there are many hidden disabilities and a lot of folks choose not to self-identify. So we can only help those that we know about. During the EOC activation, a trained person will sit in this position and facilitate the evacuation of people with disabilities by coordinating transportation of buses, determining rally points, and assisting individuals with disabilities. And just a little fact for you, 20% of Americans have a disability. This equates to 33,000 daily Houston airport travelers. Finally, recognizing how important the human element is to the airport experience, or anywhere for that matter, Houston Airports rolled out disability awareness training programs, starting with frontline employees and supervisors. It's a 1-hour interactive session, and we cover things such as the history of the ADA, definition of a disability, disability statistics, how to deliver assistance when wanted, and people first language. So seeing the response from passengers like Hayden here is priceless. We've heard from families that we've made air travel possible when they didn't think it was attainable for them. Of course, accessibility is the law, but it also changes lives. At Houston Airports, we're proud to ease the journey for passengers with disabilities, and that commitment is delivering recognition. Being recognized as a leader drives loyalty, and winning the loyalty of our community is good business. Just a closing thought before we end with the video. You know, information sharing is essential to make this airport experience a success. Without data sharing, it is impossible for us, at least us North American airports, to ensure the necessary level of service is delivered accurately, smoothly, with dignity, and on time to our customers. We need more data sharing. I'd like to close my segment with a 2-minute news clip from our Access Houston Airports app, one of our users. Thank you for your time today.
Today kicks off one of the busiest travel seasons of the entire year.
A record 31.6 million Americans will pack their bags and head out on the roads or airports. Kathy Hernandez is here to show us some things that'll make the trip through our airports at least a little bit easier. Good morning.
Absolutely, and it'll help everyone. The Houston airport system wants to make it a pleasant experience for all travelers. Just in time for the holiday travel season, it launched a new app to help children with intellectual and developmental disabilities. An airport can be a stressful place.
The waiting, all the monitors, and the noise, sensory overload.
So just enter your number.
Especially for those with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Carl Singleton was diagnosed with autism at 3 years old. But it doesn't stop his love now for traveling.
I want to be able to explore America. I want to be able to take as many flights as I can to as many cities as I can all across America.
At times, though, it was difficult.
It was really hard. It was one of the more traumatic experiences that I had. There's an interactive map.
To help those like Carl, the Houston airport system has launched a new app.
Very impressive.
It's called Access Houston Airports.
There are several different features of it, such as exploring guides, which talk all about the airport rules, security check-in, finding a plane, taking off. Kids with developmental disabilities like to be able to know what's next. They can check off what's next.
It's called a boarding pass.
A collective effort that included Dory Caden with the Arc of Greater Houston, an organization for people with disabilities.
I just think it really takes away the anxiety and takes away some of those barriers that a family might experience.
Barriers the Singleton family is breaking.
It means we can have a life again. So it's a big deal because we went 4 years without being able to fly, and it's because both of us were scared.
And the app is very helpful. Through pictures, it shows passengers what to expect from receiving a ticket to boarding a plane, a schedule checklist, and even a way to communicate to help those who are nonverbal. The app is free to download for everyone. So pretty incredible that the Houston airport system has taken this opportunity to help everyone.
That is amazing.
A great investment for its customers too, and for everybody.
And it's so easy to download for everyone.
Yeah, if you need it, boy, oh boy, great for families.
Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the fantastic video. And it brings us back to one of the themes of yesterday, hidden disabilities. You know, this view that sometimes we only focus on reduced mobility, but we always have to think about pan disability and think about all the different needs out there. So before handing over to Rich, our last panelist, I would like to remind those who have their hands up that we will get to them. Just bear with us a little bit longer. And also, I would like to remind the panelists that we have a a huge amount of questions coming through. So, Rich, over to you now. We're waiting for Rich to appear.
Just trying to get my screen up on here.
I can see you, and
that's good. Success. Let me just get my screen up. Can you see my screen?
I can see your screen, but you should put it on display mode. There you are. Perfect. Oh, perfect. The floor is yours.
Cool. Thank you very much. Thank you, Roberto. Hi everyone. I'm Rich Pereira. I'm the systems project manager for Wilson James. I'm responsible for all of the planning and data analysis, and also one of the key areas I look at is ECAC. Sorry, 1 minute. Yeah, also one of the key areas I look at is ECAC. Wilson James took over the contract in 2018. When we first started, our ECAC over here was at around 75%. We then very quickly went through a learning and development phase where we had to change from a flight-based model to a passenger-based model. To achieve this, we had to look into the data to find solutions, came up with a few answers and efficiency. One of them was zonal management. Since then, we've grown on our ECAC on 41% for 5 minutes, 38% on our 10-minute ECAC, and 25% on our 20-minute ECAC. We currently stand on ECAC for 5 minutes on 95%, 10 minutes stands on 98%, and 20 minutes stands on 99%. Another thing that led to the ECAC growth was resource and operational planning. To get to this, we used PowerCal PSMs with a mixture of historic data. We then created heat maps. It helps in resource planning for upcoming weeks. We then fed this data into a model that created the busiest days of the week for the month for us, which helps us to see our peaks and plan weeks in advance. For our day-to-day operation, we use the Ozion graph, which updates in real time, helping plan the day better with breaks and peaks for duty managers and the controllers. The next piece I want to talk about, I think we're going to talk about a lot, is SSR codes. SSR codes help us plan for each category type, so we can add that into our calculations as well. So we know we'll use double the amount of resource for, say, a WCHC passenger that comes to the airport, and we're prepared for it. We also launched Ozion's handler module at Gatwick with one of our major carriers over here that brought a lot of efficiencies in delays. It involved passengers with battery-powered wheelchairs turning up at gates but not pre-booking. So we gave airlines access to Ozion to add in those passengers by themselves, which then alerted us on the system, so we could then send an agent down there. I don't want to bore you guys with more details over here. We can quickly jump into our session, question and answer session. William, if you're ready.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Fantastic.
For those who are not familiar with European standards, ECAC is the European Civil Aviation Conference, and they have a document called Document 30. And a part of this document is about passengers with disabilities. And these standards set the times within which providers have to assist passengers through the airport. So if we can have all the panelists back online with the screens on, we can start the question and answers, the proper panel. And I will go with the questions as received. If I don't have a question specific to a panelist, I will go to you. Oh my God, I just lost all the questions.
That's okay. Well, luckily I'm here too. So
there they are. There they are. I found them again. You know, the beauty of technology and multi-screens. I'm having a moment. Okay, let's go with the first question, and this is to the entire panel. I will ask you to be concise and down to 1 minute in your replies. What tools are currently available at the airport for parsing Type B messages? How effective are they? How are airports managing airlines that send messages that are not in the correct format but have useful information? It's a very good question. I would say we start with William, maybe.
I'm sorry, I was slightly distracted. Let's start with another presenter. I have a technical issue.
We go with Rich then.
Sorry, one minute. Can you repeat the question?
Sure.
And can you explain what a Type B message is too?
What tools are currently available at the airport for parsing these Type B messages? How effective are they? How are airports managing airlines that send messages that are not in the correct format but have useful information? That's more than one question within one question. And I'll give you the honor to explain the Type B message to begin with.
I think for the messages that come in, which is not in a CETA format, I'm guessing you're talking about, it will be in an email format that comes into the thing, comes in the system. We will put them in the system manually then. As long as the message is there from the airline, the information is there, then we can add it into the system. Even if it's a day ahead or 2 days ahead, it is still pre-notification and it still helps us to plan better then. B-type messaging, not quite sure on that, so I can hand that over to Phil.
To William or Gina? Gina.
Yeah, I think the airports have the best answer on that, but this goes back to why it's so important for it to be consistent. It starts with the right codes all being used the same way so that all the messaging can be created the same way. And in the North America, it's a lot less common to use the PAL and the CAL, and those are what those messages mean. Those are the IATA CETA terms. for type B messages. That's what those are. That's just the type of message. So the bottom line is that it needs to be consistent. And so I don't know how the airports or service providers, I mean, like Ridge said, they probably have to adjust every single message that comes in just to try and make as good a service available as possible. But a consistent message will make a big difference, I'm assuming, to Ridge and his organization.
Well, can I jump in there now? I'm very sorry, everybody. I was having a technical issue on my side in the master studio. The big difference is it goes back to part of my presentation was around the use of the messages. We have been able to, in Europe, really embrace the use of the messages, and that has allowed companies like ours to then go in and start to understand them. For instance, we don't, inside of the management system, we don't reject any message. Every message is brought in. And so if it is a bad message, then it's treated inside of the system so we can identify what percentage of bad messages are we getting. Is it a challenge? Again, remember earlier I mentioned something about a space being off, or is it a message that's being sent to the wrong airport? All of that is actually quite simple to take care of as long as you set up the parameters to manage it. And then the PAL message, the CAL message, we find extremely effective in helping to provision the service and plan for the service. And then the PSM message is really what we would consider the gold standard. That means that message has come from the departure control system, and that passenger is in fact on that flight. So the ratio of passengers who are on a flight goes way up when you're using the PSM. And as many of you will remember from yesterday, for me personally, and the research that we've done, the no-shows on arrival are a huge factor this can be a part of why that's occurring. Roberto?
Thank you, William. I have a question for Tim and Phil, although Phil already gave an answer to it in his presentation. Airports should have a facilitation committee, ICAO Annex 9. All these issues are discussed, elevated to this committee, or are discussed in another group. Tim?
Yes, we do not have one at the moment. That was when I hired someone about 6 months ago. That was our first to do, and we've since reorged after hiring that person, so I'm empty-handed again, but it's on our to-do list. I do, however, have individual contacts with about 12 different organizations that represent people with disabilities. So every decision we make to increase accessibility, we bounce off of users representing people with disabilities or people with disabilities themselves.
Thank you. Phil?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think my presentation spoke to it in detail. And I guess I would just, since Tim, you've got all of those great contacts already, I think as far as standing up that committee would be pretty easy in your case. And you know, in our case, we had the Minnesota Commission on Deaf and Hard of Hearing, we had established a relationship with before we ever stood up this committee. And what I did was just tapped into their resource list to say, this is what we want to do. We want to be partners in everything that we do from a design and operational standpoint at MSP. Can you recommend individuals within the disabilities community to work with us? And they were great partners. So again, Tim, if you've got those contacts already, I think you're halfway there, and it's just a matter of standing it up and going from there.
Yeah, to Phil's point, I've got a great connection, line of sight to the governor's director of people with disabilities, and I've tapped on them to say, hey, in the Houston area, I need someone, a good person to represent the deaf, hard of hearing community, and they threw a bunch of names to me. So we've got a great resource in the governor's office.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Another question is we go back to technical now. PSM messages are usually created manually by handling agents, which can lead to differences in spelling of names, etc., causing computer systems to think the PSM refers to a different passenger to the PAL. Is there a way of restricting PSM messages to use only those names that are on the P&L? I would start with Gina, maybe.
Yeah.
Or you,
Gina, do you
I think,
go ahead, Gina.
I was just going to say, I think that's some of the work, when Linda talks about the things that are on IATA's agenda, those are the kinds of things that I think the airline industry as a whole needs to work together to do. There's no reason a PSM should be created manually. It really should be done by the system. When they PDC a flight, so the post-departure control, when they close out a flight, it should be sending that message automatically. So those are the kinds of things I think IATA can have a big influence on, is bringing the airlines together and saying, not only is this the definition of an SSR, but this is how it should be used. And then this is a PSM message, and this is how it should be generated and why it's important. And sometimes I think that's what's missing, is just the airlines are massive, right? And they're so siloed in what they do. They don't always get the value of making sure that message is accurate and consistent on the other end, the person receiving it having good, clear data to use.
On this note, since you mentioned IATA, I would like to come to you with another questions we have here on the specifics of IATA. What role does IATA play to ensure that airlines use their existing SSR codes consistently?
Well, I think that is, so IATA has put together a task force on passenger accessibility in the last year and a half, which is a good thing. So I think there's more focus on accessibility there, sort of like what Linda talked about. That group has put together a passenger accessibility manual that the IATA will be publishing early next year. And the benefit of that is there's been lots of good conversation. And I think a big part of the problem was a lack of awareness of how everyone was using these differently. I wasn't aware. I've worked in an airline for years and years and years. But until you get in those conversations, and that's one of the things I have to give airlines credit for. In a world where competition is everything, airlines work very closely together in the accessibility space to try and share best practices, and they all have a desire to make it better. And I think the good thing about IATA is their role in bringing airlines together to have those conversations. So I do think that's on the agenda for IATA and for their passenger accessibility group, is to start working towards, and in creating that manual is where it really became obvious that airlines were not using them consistently. Because when you sit in a room and you have 30 airlines and you say, this is what we do with Meet and Assist, and it's like, nope, that's not how we do it. So once you start to have that conversation, I think the awareness that everyone's doing it differently is a somewhat new thing. So I think IATA is the method for bringing everybody together and trying to improve it.
Fantastic. Back to you, William.
Well, and I also think that a part of this evolution and education that IATA can bring to the table is exactly what Gina was talking about, and that is helping everyone to understand what the codes mean and how the codes are used. There are, for those of us in Europe, you will never hear we have 10 wheelchairs at gate 42. Because in Europe, what we're doing is we're using the codes, and we can say we need assistance. We have 10 passengers, 10 clients, 10 guests that are at gate 42. But in the US, you will hear we need wheelchair assistance, or we need 10 wheelchairs at gate 42. And I think that when the airlines start to understand how the messages are formed, why the messages are so critical, we'll see a balance, because when it comes to the PAL-CAL PSM, there are ways to go through and then parse the messages, and you may have a slight difference in one or the other. And again, that's why the direction that we think that this should go in is that you take every message in and you have the opportunity to fix it. So you don't reject any messages from the operations perspective.
Great.
Yeah, exactly what William said, and that is what we do currently. So if we do see duplicates as a PSM comes in and we do have a passenger as well, we will go in and manually remove the PSM message because it's a duplicate and it is written in manually currently. So there is human error over there.
Fantastic. Now I'm going back to airports, specifically to Tim and Phil. On the in the UK, for example, and across Europe, the ECAC document 30 that I mentioned earlier stipulates that training requirements for airlines, airports, and service providers. And this ensures that largely standardized approach to training. What is the situation in the United States with regards to training at airports?
I guess I'll start, and I would say that it is very separate. The regulations that the airlines are operating under are one thing, and speak to how they're required to address passengers with disabilities, whether it's their requirement to move passengers that are connecting from gate to gate. That's one issue, but the other issue that the airlines deal with or that they operate under is that regulation of when is it their responsibility to start handling a passenger with a disability or a wheelchair customer. And the definition is when they get to the main terminal entrance. And that's, again, that's why we're in this issue or in this dilemma of we've got this gap, because we've got lots of front doors. It's not just the curbside into the main terminal. We have rental car areas, and we have other ground transportation areas where people, that's their first interaction at our airport, and therein lies the problem. As far as airports are concerned, our responsibility is that that we provide clear access from the gate space to where you board the aircraft, that we comply with the Americans with Disability Act, and that if you have multiple terminals, that you have a mechanism to bring customers from one terminal to the next. So that's really it. So I would say, as far as it's not a cohesive situation with the American airports right now, and that's why I think we find ourselves in this situation where the airlines are doing one thing based on the regulation, the airport's doing another based on regulations, and we've got a gap. And that's kind of what I was talking a little bit about, is that we've got that gap, but we're going to go to work on closing it.
Fantastic. Tim.
Yeah, I echo Phil's sentiment there. We got a lot of layers to deal with. For example, the customer service or the guest with disability awareness training I developed. I went to our TSA, our security screeners, and invited them to attend some of our sessions with the hope that they would say, hey, yeah, that's good stuff. Come share it with our employees. I did the same with the airlines, and I did the same with the wheelchair pushers. The wheelchair general manager took me up on it and would send his wheelchair pushers to the training, which, I mean, if you got to send somebody, those are the guys you need to send. The TSA was open. They sent some people for a while, but then we had the whole pandemic thing. And the airlines, no way. They trained their way, and their way is the only way. And yeah, that's how it is.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to go to a technical question for all of you. PRM data is critical in the decision-making process, in terms of assistance, in terms of how you build the environment and everything else. Which parameters you think could further optimize the analytical process? We start with Rich, maybe?
Like we spoke on earlier, getting the right data from the airlines, not having those duplicates in there, because again, that then says we're double manning people over here, doesn't give us the efficiencies that we need, and then it all has a little domino effect on everything that happens next. So yeah, I would say cleaning the data before we receive it, receiving the right data, and then we move from there.
And I would just say that one of the things that's interesting is the airline industry, and all of us know at airports, there are certain flights that come in that may have 80 or 90 wheelchair requests on them, right? And the people who are coming in that have a wheelchair request in their record may not need actually a wheelchair, right? They don't speak the language. They're worried about making their way through customs. They may get confused, whatever it is. It would be really helpful if the airlines got together and came up with a different process for that, right? More conversation with the customer up front. Do you actually need a wheelchair to walk? If the answer is no, then there's no reason you couldn't put meet and assist language, and you could have one person escort 10 people through customs. It would change completely the dynamic of that airport. But what we have to be careful about is we don't want to challenge people who ask specifically for a wheelchair request. And we don't want to get in an environment where we distrust them or accuse them of fraud, because we never want anyone to feel like it's not okay to ask for help, right? So we have to be careful how we balance that. But I think asking the question about what their true need is, if it's wayfinding, let's make sure they get the wayfinding support they need, but don't put WCHR in their record.
Fantastic. Going back to Tim.
I don't get the data that the airlines have on their passengers. We've talked about that. But when it comes to getting data for programs and services that we add to our airport, I've got to rely on outside resources such as the Center for Disease Control for statistics, advocacy groups, what they can share, US Census data, and then Open Doors organization does a great survey every few years on accessibility in the travel industry, which I use and find helpful in identifying programs and services to bring to my airport.
Phil.
Well, as many of you know, I don't really take no for an answer, and so when I hear what's happening in the U.S. and even in the European airports, all of this information is available, and when it comes to a certain airline reporting a certain way, how are we delivering the service to them as far as the SLAs that they're receiving? What effect are they having on the ecosystem of the airport? I think that this use of data gives us an ability not to go to the airline and say, oh, you're sending the wrong kind of message, it's bad, this sort of thing, but actually go to these committees, go to the airline and say, look, we can see very clearly that you've got these certain flights that come into this airport at this time, and it has this effect, not just on your service level, but the overall well-being of the airport. So I think that, and as I was saying yesterday, I think now these next 2 years is going to be a time of really breaking down barriers and saying, look, let's put the information on the table and let's come up with a solution.
Thank you. Phil.
Yeah, and I guess I would go back to Tim's comments about sharing of information, and we are just getting into it. And I don't know if you can see this or not, but this was yesterday. Our Delta Airlines wheelchair contractor shared information with me on all of their SSR requests, which again, brand new to me. And I've handed that off to our brilliant data guy, and he's going to start looking at that data to first start to digest it, and then we're going to see what we can do with it. And we're doing some really good things right now, like I'd mentioned earlier regarding security checkpoints and passenger flow through there, and really kind of the primary reason for that was to minimize wait times for our customers. So if we're able to translate that to a customer who's using a wheelchair to minimize their wait times, whether it's as they're waiting for that wheelchair, whether they are or they're going through the security checkpoint, all of the different segments of the journey that include a passenger that's utilizing a wheelchair, we're going to analyze, and we're going to see if we can optimize it and figure out a better way or a more efficient way to move them through our system. So we're kind of at the tip of the spear right now, but like I said, just got that that first piece of information yesterday. So we're excited.
See, it's already happening.
Well, I think we all agree that accuracy of information can massively improve service quality and also drive efficiencies, because the more information we have, and the better we can work. But on this subject, should SSR code and the free text part be the answer for more education, more information on the potential, on the needs of the passenger? Or is there, in your opinion, the possibility of other ways to convey the information? Gina.
So SSR codes exist and started because of all the different reservation systems that airlines use, right? So there's Amadeus, there's Sabre, whatever it is. And so there had to be some consistent way for airlines to communicate with each other, and the res systems had to have something to work off of. And so that's where the SSR codes came from. And at the time when, like, Sabre was first invented, it was so innovative to have a real-time system that could track customers and that kind of stuff. And it's still what's being used, but it is somewhat old technology as much as people try to improve it. So I think the idea of making it more friendly language for customers as they're making a booking exists, right? So in the booking process, whether it's at an OTA, on your website as an airline, you can use whatever words make it easy to say, I need wheelchair assistance because I can't walk through the airport. It's not a WCHR code, right? But in the background, those codes are what's still going to be required for all of those reservation systems, simply because there isn't the money to rewrite all of those systems, if that makes sense. That's the foundation that the airline industry is built on. Now, redoing those is a long process. So SSR codes are what we have to work with for now, but we can use much friendlier language on the front end for not only the customer, but even our frontline employees at airlines can also see it in different language if they want to. But the underlying foundation is still going to be the SSR codes.
Thank you, Gina. I want to be the devil's advocate here, and just to give the size of the problem. Normally, if you have an elderly, you would book WCHR assistance, but perhaps that person also has Alzheimer's. And that type of information would be vital for the airline or for the airport to have, because you know that that person will require constant assistance, not to get lost, not to get frightened during the journey. And this is why perhaps the use of the free text part of the SSR code could be very good. And some airlines do use it, other airlines do not. I would like the opinion from the two airports here, because they are the front line. I mean, they really see the passengers coming through. What do you think? And the question within the question for you guys is, would you prefer to switch to the European model, where there's a separation of roles between airlines and airports, so you would be in control of the journey of the passenger? Or are you okay with the current system? Tim.
Wow, oh, go ahead, Tim.
No, I was going to say it's all yours, Phil.
Yeah, I guess I'll start with the free text question, and just in the dialogue that I've had with our wheelchair contractors who report to the airlines, but we have good relationships and partner with them, and they say that they would love more information, because on a day-to-day basis they're getting surprised by the type of disability or disabilities that they're encountering, and if they had that information beforehand, they'd be able to provide a better service. And kind of back to my comment before about wait times, is that a wheelchair pusher will show up to the gate thinking that they've got one type of disability, and it's something different, or it's something beyond what they can handle. Then that passenger waits because the contractor's got to get somebody else involved, and and it just creates a longer process. And again, in a very time-sensitive environment, that information could be key. So yeah, you know, at least from our contractor standpoint, the more information, the better, and the more detailed information, the better. As far as your question about the model, you know, certainly I hear a lot about the European model and where the airport has that oversight responsibility, and it certainly seems, you know, I don't have firsthand experience. I just know what I hear, and certainly the having that oversight and control seems to be the best service to the customer, because again, we're dealing with this gap issue that I've talked about that doesn't exist in Europe, and I think that's the difference between the two models, is that gap. And you know, I'm going to go to work on trying to close that gap, but I've got to get the buy-in from the airlines, because there could be dollars involved if we were to enhance the program, and are they going to buy off on it? And that's one of the challenges that we're going to get into as we delve further into this situation.
Tim and then Rich.
Yes, I would love to have that information. The airlines may not even know what we're capable of doing to make their passenger experience better, or what we're willing to do if we had that information in our hands. As far as the best model, yeah, the European sounds good, but if the airports have control in Europe, there should be no dissatisfied customers if you own the process, right?
Well, that depends, of course. You see, and now we go back to one of the few things the pandemic brought about. Up until the end of 2019, the entire system was chasing assistance. It was a constant chase to the growing numbers. So there was no time to stop and think, and there was no time to see which gaps can be closed and how, because it was just wake up in the morning and get through the day. And this was across the world. I mean, I don't think it was any different in the United States. But right now, the pandemic brought about the opportunity to stop, analyze, think, and perhaps change those things that could work better, even with the current tools, but could work much better for the end user, and at the same time drive efficiencies, because we know that for the foreseeable future, driving efficiency is going to be at the top of the list. If that answers your question.
Yeah, I just want to say two quick things. One, the use of SSR codes, the formatting of those SSR codes always has free text. So you don't lose free text by using an SSR code. It's just the SSR code is at the beginning of the message, so you know what it is, and then you can add any free text you want. So that isn't lost by using SSR codes, just to be clear. And the idea of somebody who needs a wheelchair but also may have dementia, you could use WCHR and DP&A to say that with free text on each one, so you have complete information about that passenger. So that's where there is a lot of opportunity in the SSR codes if they're used correctly, and you can still use the free text. And then on the idea of which model works better, the European or the North American, I have long been an advocate that somebody needs to study it and do the economic model for airlines and for service providers and for airports, to look at it from beginning to end and be a neutral third party that says this is the good and the bad of both. If that study was done, I think you could improve on the European model, because you'd have input on what's working and what's not. And it could certainly inform the decision making in North America to say these gaps go away if you go to X model or whatever that is. Right now, airlines don't have enough information to know which one's better or less expensive or best customer service. So a study, I think, would be helpful.
Thank you, Gina. Rich, I saw you were nodding.
Gina said it really well, using the SSR codes and the free text. Free text is always there, and having more information is always good for the service provider and for the airlines. It, like the examples Gina said earlier, when people get booked in as a WCHR, then they end up just not having end up having language barriers. So that was the only problem, because just taking you with one agent, taking you as a group across the whole airport. So yeah, free text. More information, the better.
Oh, sorry.
No. I
Rich.
would just say the more information, the better.
Thank you, Rich. William.
I think that they've touched on it very well, and that is that the underpinnings of the SSR codes and the types and the messages themselves are all there. It's a matter of, again, the education process of understanding what the implication of each of those are, and then again, being able to design and build systems that then combine the airport, the infrastructure that's there. And I think this is where, if we start talking about the American airports, the European airports, all airports, is that it's a combination of, we're talking about outdated SSR codes, the potential for them being outdated, but the real challenge in many airports is the airport operating database. That many of these airports are running very old database systems, and so that flight information becomes a challenge to bring in. So it really is a matter of the airport, the airlines, and the assistive services coming together and saying, how best can we manage this service?
Thank you, William. I'm going back to Tim and Phil with a slightly naughty question that just came through. For all of this to work well, data sharing is critical. Airlines, however, may not want to share the data for various reasons, be it commercial or other reasons. What strategies can airports put in place to encourage airlines to provide the data and make it maybe mandatory? Sharing data with airports. Tim, you want to start on that?
Sure. Well, you can certainly put language in your use and lease agreements that you have with them and see what they're willing to bite off. I'm sure that some airlines at different stations might be willing to offer more information than, say, you're at a large hub somewhere versus a smaller area. Just asking. I mean, we've got relationships with our airlines. Some airlines play along a little better than others, and trying to seek the cooperation of those who are willing to play and pitch that, look, it's for the good of the cause. Your passengers, we want your passengers, when they have a choice to travel and they connect somewhere, we want them to use our airport to connect through, and not someone up in North Texas or in Georgia.
Thank you, Tim. Phil.
Yeah, I'll say that it's about building relationships and building that trust with all of the airlines. And I'll draw on a specific example. It was many years ago now, at least 10, 12 years ago, we started asking the airlines for their bookings forecasts on a day-to-day basis because of the challenges that we were seeing at the security checkpoints, and our TSA not being able to effectively be ready with the number of staff that they need, the number of security lanes that they need. And so we went to the airlines and said, can we get that information from you on a day-to-day basis? And first, in our case with a dominant carrier in Delta Airlines, if we can get Delta to the table, then the other airlines, for the most part, will follow suit. So we started with Delta, and one by one, all of the airlines see the benefit of getting that information to a central point, and then getting that information out to all of our stakeholders on a day-to-day basis. Because if we can optimize the operation and minimize those wait times, everybody wins. So fast forward to today. I get that information. A large cross-section of the airport gets that information every single day. All of the airlines broken out by hour. So we have a really good operating picture on what the day is going to be. And even we look out 14 days. So the airlines are providing that information 14 days into the future. And then the other thing that we do is we meet weekly with all of the airlines, with TSA, with other stakeholders. It's a meeting that I get to facilitate, and we talk about what happened the week before. We kind of review all of the operational data, what's happening coming up in the next week. And again, I think it's all about establishing those relationships, building trust so that everybody recognizes that, you know, you're not out there getting their information for devious reasons. You're getting it because we've got the best interests of the customer in mind.
Thank you, Phil. From an advocacy standpoint, there is a question that came through that is very close to my heart. Personally, I believe that everybody should be able to enjoy a dignified and independent journey, or as independent as it can be. So this question touches 2 points. One is technical from the IT perspective, and one is about infrastructure. Should accessibility and universal design be at the core of every new terminal project and every new major refurbishment? But also, what is the prospect of IT integrating with other systems available at the airport to track the passenger journey so that assistance can be provided where and when needed? I'll give you an example. In the UK, there is a famous journalist from the BBC who is a WCHC passenger and is firmly independent. He wants to stay independent throughout his journey. However, he needs assistance in planing and deplaning, and that's the only critical touch point for him. So perhaps the use of assistance and IT to direct the teams where they have to be, when they have to be, rather than forcing the passengers to be assisted in a slightly patronizing way throughout the journey, could be a great improvement for the dignified journey I mentioned yesterday. And I keep repeating dignified, because seamless journey is good, but dignified is the best. I would like to start with Ridge from the Ridge and William from the IT perspective, and then we go to you guys.
I think that's something we can do currently when we put into the system saying the passenger is a WCHC passenger and they're making their own way to the gate. We can then encourage that behavior as well, and then we can put it into the system saying we only need to assist the passenger once they're at the gate. So my agents will then be present at the gate and not throughout the whole journey that the passenger needs to have then.
So it is doable.
Yeah. We currently do it now, but there are a lot of people that go and start their journey at the gate, because that's where they put it into the system saying passenger is at the gate, or they'll come to the desk and they will let us know at the desk. So that is one point where they'll have to touch us. So coming up to one of our desks, maybe landside or airside into the IDL, they will have to come to the desk and tell us, I'll be at the gate and this is my flight number. And then I don't need to send any of my agents with them. They will be present at the gate for them. So
brilliant.
Well, this is a very interesting concept, because we've been having the conversation for a number of years now about where, for instance, if you have your own mobility device, where does the handler take your mobility device? Some now want it way back at check-in, or they take it before you go to the gate. Many European airports now they allow that to go to the gate, and then the systems. There are many layers to this again, where we can catch it. Currently, we're catching it inside of the PRM management system, so that a passenger can arrive at the airport, demand service basically at any point during their journey, or just signal that they'd like to have the assistance at the gate. And again, in the case of the mobility devices, when this happens, it gives the gate staff the ability to understand that that mobility device is coming as well, because that's a whole entire job unto itself to move that and stow it properly in the aircraft. And so there is when we start talking about the education from IATA and the free text and this sort of thing, it is possible to say that a passenger is a carry passenger. They have their own mobility device, and you can say right in the free text, only requires assistance at gate. So there are a number of ways that this can be handled, but currently we manage it inside of our system.
Gina.
So the Air Carrier Access Act in the United States allows an airline cannot force someone to give up their wheelchair until they get to the door of the airplane. So for the vast majority of customers who travel with their own device in the United States, they don't give it up at the ticket counter, and the airlines can't ask them to. So for the most part, you are not providing any service except that lift, as you said, in-planing and deplaning. And so that's a WCHC. If somebody wants to give up their wheelchair at the ticket counter, they're a WCHC and they could be a WCHR, right? Because they then also need assistance through the airport. It's not really, so the codes are there to be used if everybody used them the same, right? But they're not today, right? So it's critical to know that somebody's a WCHC because it is a different kind of service, right? You have to use the aisle chair, the Mobi Lift, whatever you're going to use at the gate. So it's important to know that. So I think that the codes are there, they just need to be used consistently, right? And one of the big things that I think airlines worked hard in developing the IATA Passenger Accessibility Manual is to talk about when someone's traveling with their own device, how you take care of it. And coming up with a tag that everybody can use, because one of the big questions when somebody travels with their own device, they can get themselves to the gate just fine, but they give up their mobility device. Do they want it on their connection? Do they need it on their connection? Or do they need to use a wheelchair transport, at the airport on the connection? That's the kind of information that's critical to know. And you can do it with SSR codes if everybody did it the same. And it's important to mark the wheelchair to bag tag for that so that the person on the ramp knows I can transfer this on the ramp, or I need to take it up to the gate because the person needs it to get from point A to point B at the airport. So those are critical things that, as you said, are all part of the conversation with the customer that need to be documented in the record. And you can do it using SSR codes and free text. It just needs to be done. It needs to be trained, needs to be done consistently.
Thank you, Gina. Let's go back to the first part of the question, the built environment. We start with Phil.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question of whether or not accessibility should be part of every terminal project, I enthusiastically say yes. But I also will say that it depends. Certain projects are going to need a bigger focus than others. For example, if we're in the middle of a remodel project that includes our airport police department, and so they're obviously going to be the primary customer in terms of what their needs are. But certainly there's going to be an accessibility component. I guess it depends whether it's the police or maintenance or customer experience, myself, accessibility. But yeah, absolutely, accessibility should have a seat at the table. And I'll just give you one example, and Tim knows this as well because they had the Super Bowl the year before we had it. But we had this massive year-and-a-half planning process that we went through to make sure that our airport system was ready to receive the Super Bowl, because we knew one thing operationally, we were going to have the busiest day in our airport's history the day after Super Bowl, and we in fact did. But we had this big planning process, and we had 29 different committees that were working on all kinds of different things. But one of those committees was accessibility. So every time that we were meeting on a particular topic, or we were meeting on a monthly basis, all 29 of those committees got to report out on the work that they were doing, ask questions, share concerns, and that included accessibility. So that's been a kind of a spot that I can point to say that accessibility's got a seat at the table, whether it's terminal design or the Super Bowl.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, I can tell you that 5 years ago, our designers and our infrastructure people weren't talking about accessibility features, but instead we're just going, they want build project X, you do project X. You want project Y, do project Y. Now I've got them in conversation. We've got a great time to make improvements. We've got a $1.5 billion terminal capital project, and new construction is the best time to address these things. But by the time you hear about new construction coming, rest assured that some others already have that space taken or planned for. We do plan on universal access restrooms for our new facilities. I even had our IT folks call me and say, hey, anything on your wish list for our new facilities? And I'm like, well, I'd like you to explore what's out there for accessibility, but at the same time, I'd like to have consideration for a hearing loop installed in our new facility, and sensory rooms, and changing rooms for adults. Going back to Phil, when you got an old facility like our Terminal A, and rules change, and I know it's been some time, but they say, oh, well, now you need an indoor service animal area, and everything's already occupied. It's like, what can we take away to put that in? So you end up losing a family restroom to turn into a animal relief area, or some concessionaires storage space gets taken away from them to turn into a mother's room. So certainly a lot easier with new construction or significant capital improvements, but I'm proud to say that our people are at least talking about it. And if I'm not involved in the construction process, someone who is calling me and saying, hey, what do you think about X, Y, and Z? So I like the communication that's going on internally here.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So just a quick note for attendees. Unfortunately, we are almost running out of time. All questions will be answered after the conference, and I apologize if we didn't manage to answer all questions, but we really had, as you've seen, I kept getting distracted because every 5-10 seconds we were getting a new question from the floor, which is good. but of course, time is playing against us. So I have, before the very last questions, I have one that I have promptly lost. And let me find it again, sorry. From the floor that is specific for Ridge and William. My apologies. I have been struggling with this.
Roberto,
with my screen the whole time. Okay, here it is.
While you're pulling this up, I actually see that Thekla Giorgio with Hermes Airport has put up her hand, and she actually wanted to just touch base on the question of should accessibility and universal design be at the core of every new terminal project. Would you mind if we tested the system and allowed for her to come in for one moment?
Absolutely.
And of course, right when I said that, I lost her. Here she is. Thelka, can you hear us?
Hello, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity. So I would like to touch upon this point of should accessibility and universal design be a part of every terminal project. And I would like to emphasize on what Tim and Phil are saying, that we need to collaborate with all stakeholders for every new project that are coming at the airport. I mean, in our case, right at the beginning of the terminal building, when the terminals were constructed, we seek advice from the disabilities organizations along with all the stakeholders, and that I can say is very beneficial because, I mean, who else knows what they need than the persons who actually need it? And in building the PRM, changing places for adults, which are the first in Cyprus and the whole area, I must say, the feedback from the paraplegic organization of Cyprus was so important that we actually had to make, last minute changes and amendments on the equipment based on their knowledge and their feedback on users, because they actually can see things that we even might miss. And we always have this in mind when when dealing with new projects and new terminal things like the restroom refurbishment projects, and the commercial redesign. And what Tim actually said is very, very in our daily lives, that sometimes we might struggle with other departments, that we might take out a restaurant to build a sensory place, and we might, use a space that would either bring commercial benefits to the company. But when we take into consideration the actual PRMs and the holistic approach on how their experience should be, This is very important to all our daily livings. And I would just like to say one last thing on something that Roberto mentioned on PRM operations like chasing, even before the pandemic. And I would like to say that we should think the PRM like an individual opportunity, an individual customer experience opportunity, because every PRM has different needs, different approach that we should have to them. We should always respect that at that specific point, we're dealing with one customer, and that customer is very important. And it's not just about numbers. I mean, I can appreciate the numbers and we all want to have big numbers, but sometimes we should always remember that. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thekla. And I think the point that we were making earlier was about the fact that the numbers were rising so fast and keeping up with those numbers. I've been an advocate around this conversation of also looking at, when you're looking at new terminal, new design, anything inside of the airport, that you also include not just the passenger journey, but the operational impacts. How do we design our airports for these ever-rising numbers of passengers that will return? Roberto?
Yes, thank you. So I have the question for Ridge and William. Often analytical and parsing tools ignore the free text. How can these systems cope with the free text to use the information and convert it to a knowledge for the airports? Rich.
So I think that's a more William question.
Okay, then William.
Yeah, there's different ways to approach it, but primarily the idea is that we don't ignore any text. And again, you bring all of the data in. So you could have a message that comes in free text in a PAL message that you still want to keep, but another message comes in and says, well, we're going to change. So you keep the free text. So I think it has a lot to do with retention.
Thank you,
William. I think
so
the point she's trying to get, sorry. So I think that's the point, William, that she's trying to get on, saying we are keeping both of them then. So again, the data then is a bit squared over there, where we need to clean that bit up. So
right. Well, you clean it, but you keep it.
Yeah. It's not discarded. It's not lost.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Very good. So unfortunately, I have to wrap this up. Time is against us. So I would like each one of you, starting with Rich, to share what's the key takeaway of today for you.
Data. The more information we get, the better. Just keep giving us information and sharing information. And sharing information is the same thing. Like one of the things that Phil had said about not getting enough information from the airlines and everything. So over here, we do our passenger forecast, and then we share it with the airport. Then the airport do their passenger forecast. They share it with us, and then we. So it helps them with their security times. So there's no peaks in all of their security lanes. It just helps with better planning. Sharing data. Sharing is caring.
Thank you, Tim.
I like the data sharing concept as well. I wish we had more of it. Whenever Phil can break through that barrier and get it, I'll be right there behind you, taking it from you. But I think a takeaway I'd like to have is for all of us to go back and share with our employees just the importance of recognizing individuals and the differences among individuals, and that people with disabilities are people too. And it should be not just how we look for them in our airports, but how we look for them in our daily lives, in our grocery stores, in our parking lots, in malls, whatever, to just go the extra mile and ask someone how you can help them and make a difference. And I wonder if anyone, hey, William, have you ever seen any code WTF? All right, thanks.
Phil.
Yeah, what I would say too is, the information sharing, and again, just being on the tip of the spear here in Minneapolis with getting this information, and thankfully we have a system that's already in place in terms of information that's being shared by the airlines on a day-to-day basis, and starting to share this the accessibility information with us on a day-to-day basis. And again, the bottom line being, that my job as the customer experience guy is to enhance the experience for all of our customers, and then just recognizing that needs to be done equitably. Some customers are going to need a little more assistance, some others are going to need a little less, but the end of the day is that we want everybody to have that same experience. And again, I go back to that line that I used while I was presenting, and I steal it from Eric Lipp from Open Doors. We do this because it's the right thing to do for everybody.
Gina.
So I'll just go back to, it's all about the customer, right? And making that is the best experience possible. And everything we do to improve the experience for somebody who needs special assistance, accessibility in some way, improves it for everyone. So there's benefit in doing that work. And I love what Tim said about that basic training of disability awareness benefits everyone in their day-to-day life working at an airport, or in their day-to-day life interacting with other people, and it's a great foundation. And then lastly, consistent use of information from all the airlines, which is the starting point, would make a huge difference for every stakeholder.
Thank you, Gina. William.
Well, I would just like to thank everyone, because I think that part of what we were really striving to do today was to bring a lot of these different challenges to the surface. And what I saw was, as we continued throughout the day, that we all sort of started to have a new understanding of where we are and where we're going. So thank you to the entire panel for taking the time, and for all of you bringing the wonderful insights that you brought.
So thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you very much to all the attendees that have been steadily with us. I was following the numbers and we didn't have any sort of variation. So everybody stuck with us, which means that you guys did an excellent job. I would also like to thank the guys in the background, and that's Kevin, Alexa, Thomas, and Jan, for making this possible. They've been working very hard in the past weeks. They've been working super hard yesterday and today. So they have a well-deserved party after the conference. It has been a great pleasure for me to be here, and again, I think this event is testament to the fact that accessibility is at the front and center of the global thoughts in this industry. So I'm very hopeful that in the future everybody will have equal access to air travel. Thank you very much to everyone from me, and over to William for the closing notes.
Well, for those of you that have attended the event in person over the last number of years, you know that our event's a bit different because we like to have fun. So before we leave, I would like you all to get ready. When I finish with my words here, I'm going to unmute the entire audience. And when I say hip hip, I would love it if you would all say hooray. Hooray to all of you, and to again, like Roberto said, everybody who worked so hard to make this event such a success. Time sure does fly by. I would like to thank all of our amazing presenters over the last 2 days, and all of you who have participated in this year's conference. We will be sending out a call for next year's Airport Accessibility Award entries in early June. Congratulations once again to Bologna Airport for winning this year. They had a very strong competition with the amazing entries from both Napoli and John Lennon Liverpool airports. In an effort to keep the solutions dialogue going, we've created an online forum where stakeholders can continue the conversation beyond the conference. You're invited to join, share your thoughts, experiences, challenges, etc. It's already building, and it's already starting to take shape with member suggestions. For instance, an example yesterday was given by my friend Gavin Neat, who suggested a staffing and tech channel. So Kevin Knight here in our office opened it up, and now the conversation is already buzzing. The next Ozione Insight survey report on the COVID-19 will be out by the end of this month, and those of you who submit your input will receive it first. Thank you all once again. Look for a pop-up when we close the conference. Your feedback will be greatly appreciated. And with that, I'm going to do a test and see if I can unmute the group. And somehow there's a way to And of course, I had this great idea, and I thought there was a, yeah, I think everybody now has the ability to speak. So I say hip hip, and you say hooray. Hip hip.
Hooray.
Hooray.
Hooray. Hip hip. Hooray. Thank you all once again. And we look forward to seeing you next year. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. Thank you.